Yes, and for those of you who have missed it, because if any of you noticed, I managed to skip the introductions. I'm Tyler Irvin, Technology Support Librarian here at Selco. And today I'm going to be talking to you about eBooks Minnesota. So, what is it? It is a statewide collection of ebooks available and funded through Minitex. Minitex is the starting one behind this. They started it off with some funding from an LSTA grant. They're currently working on developing it and trying to figure out the funding sources behind it. I happen to sit on the collection development committee for this one, so I know a bit about it, a bit more than most people, but I wasn't involved in the actual setup, so I'm going to try to cover what I do know and what's important to you. Now, this collection of ebooks is based on a BiblioBoard. That's the application from the vendor and the platform for their catalog for it. So that's the important parts of that. Okay, accessing it. This is what you really want to know, right? So this whole collection of ebooks that is out there for your use can be found at EbooksMN.org. That's currently the best way to get to it. Or if you search through Minitex, they can have it there. And on the Minitex website, there is FAQs for the librarian side of it. There are user guides if you need to print them off for all of that. And a bunch of other useful information for the librarian side. For the public side, you just go to EbooksMN. Otherwise, Minitex, just Google that. You should be able to find that fairly quickly. It works based on location authentication, which I never realized that's how it sounds like when you actually pronounce it. So it checks against your location through your IP and then returns it back to whether you can get in or not. I'm not 100% sure how it works because it doesn't connect to our database yet if you're in a border region. But basically, when you go into the catalog, it will ask you for your location or if you want to search by your physical location. Searching by the physical location should pretty much put you into the EbooksMN collection no matter what. I'm hoping. Like I said, they haven't been very clear on how that part works. Users can also create their own profiles at that point. If you don't create your own profile, you still have access to this and you can view the books online. If you create your own profile, you can download the materials to your device, including the apps which are available through the iTunes Store and through Google Play. Now, the other two parts are a bit trickier. MARC records. They have been working with OCLC to get MARC records on this, and we know how working with OCLC can go. So I know that the director of Minitex has had at least one director rage at them going, we need these records. They aren't quite ready yet. And they have also been working with Circe Dynix, who is our vendor for Horizon and Enterprise, to create an API which will allow us to connect it into our Enterprise directly so that we can handle that without putting the MARC records in Horizon. For those of you who know how Overdrive works in our collection, that's good. That's basically the same thing. In fact, it is the same thing. We just need to get that fully developed for this collection and implemented in our catalog for it to work. On an unrelated side note, for any schools here, we are working on getting that up and running for Mac and VIA in the near future soon too. Okay, the collection itself. When it comes to the license agreements, Minitex has been, the term that comes to mind is fairly old school with how they have been negotiating their license agreements, because when they negotiate them, they get access to the materials in perpetuity. They own access to the ebooks. They don't license them, unlike our collection with Overdrive, which has its benefits, although it does limit what you have access to purchase. So the upside is once it's there for good, unless it's weeded out of the collection. But the other thing with their collection is that it's based on publisher collections. So instead of like how when I buy our titles for Overdrive or schools buy them for Mac and VIA, which they do want to buy this title, I want this title, that title. When it comes to this collection, they're buying them by groups, like by a publisher imprint. Like, I know they don't have this one, but the one that comes to mind immediately is Dark Horse. They have been focusing primarily on titles, or publishers rather, which are Minnesota-based or Minnesota-focused at this point. From the discussions we've had in the Collection Development Committee, it will probably be expanding beyond that, although not in the immediate future. And there's also a limitation is when they purchase this collection is the titles they have. Further titles would have to be purchased later on in another group. So it isn't like we have access to everything from this collection. They're going to keep on adding things to it. It's a snapshot of what was in that imprint at that time. The one upside of this being the in perpetuity license agreements is the circulation rules are basically anyone can check out as many titles as they want and there's no term on them. So you have access to that. Unlimited simultaneous access for perpetuity. Now, title availability. In this particular case, I'm referring to what's already in the collection. At this point, most of the materials in the collection have been focusing, well, it's the scope of the collection development, which is actually one of my topics that I'm writing for the collection development, has been very broad at this point, which is fine. But how it has actually been working is most of the materials in there are focused on adult, more nonfiction academic, or children's materials. There is a lot of children's materials in here, and there's also a fair amount, and there's going to be more expansion upon children's materials in other languages. So those are the big ones right now. There is a small young adult collection, but there's not much to it at this point. As we have been talking in the Collection Development Committee, the major point of this collection of ebooks is going to be to supplement ebook collections which are already available locally throughout the state. So for the most part, it won't be the bestsellers, it won't be Stephen King, it won't be Neil Gaiman, even though he has Minnesota connections, or William Kent Kruger, but it will be other things like guidebooks to Minnesota, other children's materials that are published here in Minnesota. If you aren't aware, Minnesota has a very vibrant publisher community, particularly in the Mankato and the Twin Cities areas, especially when it comes to children's materials. So there's been a heavy focus on that. Okay, we need to finish up, so questions at this point. I might be able to answer them, otherwise I can record them down and ask when I have my next meeting. No? Okay, we're going to go on break then. We're going to start up at 10:50. Please be back in here at this time. Thank you.